in my scenario, you know, Waka, how fast do they go in Waka? I have this car coming from the highway, and we're going toward the post office, right? So across from the Lucky Dollar, that's where he's going to be walking across, because his friend is across there, Bartowski. And so we see this car coming. You know how those shots of a vehicle coming in the distance, they're kind of like almost, you can almost see the heat waves and everything. The car is coming and coming. Meantime, this guy's finding out he's been fired, and blah, he's in the post office, and his friend back there is getting a donut, and they're kind of, so of course, and it's an old man driving this car. You can barely see him over the steering wheel, you know, and he's coming. And it's, you know, you get this suspense building up, even though he's hardly moving. But sure enough, when the guy comes across the street and his complete, you know, he's in a real snit and just not thinking at all, there's this huge moment when the car creaks to a stop and he just about gets hit by the car. Anyway, that, you know, I just thought what a beautiful visual image for especially a prairie town like this. You know, it just kind of, it sort of creates a motif for the whole damn story, you know, the whole thing. Yeah, I like that stuff. As an actor, you know, when you're in the film industry, you develop a real appreciation for visual imagery and you know, stuff. Yeah. So, but anyway, this book. Yeah, it's yeah. I started off with people in the old country. So I have 3 couples, Ukrainian, Hungarian, and German, beginning in their specific countries. In all cases, a romance develops between a young couple. So it's got a very romantic beginning. In the midst of oppression, in the midst of a need to get out. So they all 3 escape. They come to the country. They all settle on the shores in the vicinity of Waka and the lake. And they begin their lives. And one character succeeds immensely. He becomes the biggest farmer in the district. And I fashioned him after. There are 1 or 2 farmers in this district who are hugely successful, run mammoth operations. Another farmer, sort of a middle of the road, he's, you know, has his ups and downs and essentially follow his story. And then a third character is the character that I find most interesting, and that is the one who dreams of building a town on the shores of the lake where his homestead exists. And of course, it doesn't work out the way he wanted to because, and then I bring in other characters, because of the characters from the East who represent Ottawa and the interests of money and politics, and they ultimately interfere with this tiny little farmer's plan to build this town, which he foresees. He sees the poplar leaves draw aside like a curtain, and there, initially, he just sees a farm. He sees cattle in his house and his barn and the amber waves of grain. And then later he adjusts his vision. It becomes more grand. And suddenly he sees a town with broad avenues of trees. And he sees a huge, you know, a cathedral. And he sees his own business, a blacksmith shop. No, a factory, and he's the owner, and he and his wife are the leading citizens of the town. They hobnob with all the important people, and they have their place in the church, and they, you know, and this is his dream. Of course, it's very difficult to achieve that. And as I say, so I also have characters who come from Ottawa. A particular character, a senator, who has a great deal to do with the plans for the town site development in Saskatchewan, and there was such a character, and the railroad is another huge interest, and all of these interfere with this tiny man's plan, his dream. So, and then I have also quite a large recounting of the Riel Rebellion, both in Red River in 1870, as well as the second one in 1885, just here a few miles from Waka in Batoche. And I also deal with the Indian residential schools. And although these stories, you know, could easily, I suppose, be completely left out, I feel they're very important because to the citizens of Waka, in a way, living our lives here in this small town, we've had so little contact with our native brethren, you know, and living so close, they finally, kids from the One Arrow Reserve finally came to Waka School in the late 70s and early 80s. They began to come to our school. In fact, my mother was teaching home ec at the time, and she was teaching when these kids came to this school. Before that, well, up until even, I think it wasn't until the 90s that the final residential school was closed. These residential schools were terrible in the sense that the outcome was so hard on the Native community. Even though the intention of the churches and the government was, I suppose, honorable, if not very misguided, they felt the Indians couldn't survive without the buffalo and that they had to be turned into white men. So they almost took this crusade to biblical proportions. It was Old Testament all over again, where hell, you know, a little bit of mistreatment or a little bit of rigid discipline, or in fact the odd rape, you know, a priest maybe wasn't necessarily terribly severely disciplined, he was simply moved on. You know, my God, Joshua, when he fought the Battle of Jericho, he slaughtered the whole town. You know, what are a handful of Indians here? Let's get them straightened out. I mean, we're saving their lives. You know, my God, they're savages after all. They'll never make it unless they learn the white man's ways. And so I felt it was important to tell that story, just to tell that story to the people of Waka. I think of this novel so much. To me, it's wonderful to have an audience for your work, and I guess that's why it's always been my motivation to write about Waka, because I felt, to me, the most important readers of this work are the people here. I'm writing for them, to them, and it helps to influence your writing too. It gives your writing a sort of a sense of it. You have to have an audience. You've got to be writing to somebody as a writer. So yeah. Anyway, so these people carry on, and I used two books that were helpful. One was The Land Harvested by Faith, a book that was written by a committee of Waka here in 1984. My parents were on that committee, and a bunch of other great people who solicited stories from the families throughout the region, got a huge number of good stories. So there are bits and pieces, you find out about what things cost and how the Depression affected people, all sorts of things about family life, little vignettes, little dribs and drabs of stories about human life in this part of the world that I was able to incorporate within the parameters of these characters that I had created. So there's a lot of authenticity in that sense. I tried to make it as authentic as I could. I'm hoping, I'm interested in the feedback I may get, as people read the book to see, this didn't happen, sort of thing. And I found it's funny, I've been pretty good at extrapolating sometimes, or just relying on my common sense to direct me in the right way in which to tell me what sort of a story was likely and what was probably unlikely, so that sort of thing, yeah. And so the story basically follows these three groups for about up to 5 generations. And one of the things that one of the serendipitous aspects of this thing was this evolution of this canal notion. And the fact that Waka was in a crisis, it's developed, and here it's come to a head with the hospital being, closed. In fact, and it's affected me personally because my father has taken ill, and we've had to send him by ambulance to Rosthern. And now we have to go back and forth to Rosthern to see him, whereas when my mom passed away, she was in the hospital for a couple of months here at Waka. And we would go back and forth and see her, within a few blocks every day, many, many times. We saw her, spent time with her. So, yeah, one of the things that would... Oh, yeah. So the canal project might have revitalized the town had it gone through. And I guess Ed Kidd hasn't given up on it yet. But... so the story, it's wonderful in that I was able to incorporate this story throughout, from the beginning of the novel to the end. as we went back and forth in time, we do have a through line that follows the progress of the canal all the way from its inception as an idea to its ultimate failure as a reality, at least at this point. The fact that the hospital, you know, has been closed also ties in to the failure of the canal. And you know, as a storyteller, I couldn't ask for better material, and yet, as a human being, as a, you know, someone in sympathy with Walker, it's a tragedy that these things have failed as they have. In any case, Ed Kidd and another fellow whom I don't recognize, that is, for his ideas, was another fellow by the name of Rudichuk. Rudichuk is spelled in 4 different ways in this town. Was also, I guess he along with Ed Kidd originated the idea for the canal. I haven't got enough, I decided to just stick with Ed as the prototype for this man. I changed his name and so on, but, and essentially Ed's been in town, I guess, for, I don't know, 20 years or something, and isn't necessarily from here, but my character, who is embodied in the Ed Kidd personality, is the fellow who is actually the great-great-grandson of this man who envisioned a town on the lake. So what I'm doing here is my character, who's wants to build the canal, is trying to restore the town to the lake, as it were. If we can't bring the town back to the lake, we'll bring the lake to the town, we'll build a canal and create, really fill in the space that was left by time and lost. So it follows the idea that he's got ambition like his great-great-grandfather. He starts off in the city and he just can't stand it. He comes to town, he starts a business, and he's just got so much energy and such desire to do something with his life. And so when he gets the idea of the canal, he begins to pursue it. He enlists the support of others, and these others, of course, are the main characters who have come from the old country. You know, the ones we've been following. They become involved in this thing. And yeah, we just follow the process all the way through, right up until, and the scene that I love best in this whole book is the appearance of the town fathers on the Dragon's Den. This show I watch it, I really enjoy it. I had a business for a while, so I really enjoy watching this Dragon's Den. And so I know it so well, I know the characters of the dragons so well, that when I envisioned these fellows, the Waka people, the 2 people who went in and appeared on the Dragon's Den, I had some facts. I didn't know what happened, except I knew the figures that they had brought in to the dragons, and sort of what they had asked for, and that they had been unsuccessful, that the dragons had all bowed out. So other than that, I didn't know anything except that the things they would say and the way the dragons would respond to them would be pretty close to what would really have happened, because the dragons are the dragons, you know. And yeah, just having had some entrepreneurial experience and then watching the dragons as I had so much gave me, I think, the knowledge to write up a really, really interesting scenario. And having been an actor and seen what it's like, for instance, just like I have these guys waiting in the green room, you know, the room set aside for performers before they go on. And they're there for hours, you know, and people come and go. And, you know, like usually when you're doing something, it's a lot of wait. It's called hurry up and wait. And so, yeah, just that whole sort of build up to their final appearance when they're suddenly shoved out there into this smoke-filled atmosphere, and they can hardly see the dragons. They look like 5 mythical beasts, you know, out there through the lights that are in their eyes. And these poor guys from Waka, you know, they're just really brand new at this whole game, you know. So